Donald Trump announces that negotiations over Gaza are progressing very well. Netanyahu states that Israel will not implement any provisions unless all Israeli detainees are released. And the foreign ministers of Egypt and 7 other nations welcome Hamas's response in a joint statement. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that negotiations over Gaza are progressing very well, expressing optimism about the ongoing talks between the parties involved. He confirmed that the release of all detainees is expected to take place very soon, emphasizing that discussions remain active and constructive. Trump described the recent developments as encouraging, noting that all sides appear committed to achieving tangible results that could pave the way for broader peace efforts in the region and an end to the prolonged conflict.
لا أقول أنه لا يوجد لدينا جريمة أخذ الأمر 12 يوما لحل المشكلة وسوف
Earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly clashed with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during a phone call after Hamas responded to Trump's Gaza peace proposal. And according to the American media, Netanyahu dismissed Hamas's reply as meaningless and prompting an irritated Trump to call him too damn negative, insisting the move was a victory. Trump urged Netanyahu to seize the opportunity for peace, later calling for an immediate halt to Israeli airstrikes, a directive Netanyahu issued hours afterwards. U.S. officials said the tense exchange ultimately ended in agreement, with the two of them reaffirming cooperation. Trump warned Hamas against stalling and confirmed progress towards an updated Israeli withdrawal map ahead of indirect Cairo talks involving U.S. envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff.
Advancing peace in the Middle East.
Countries that are involved in this, we probably should. Big day, a beautiful day, potentially one of the great days.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has expressed optimism that a deal between Israel and Hamas could be finalized early this week to secure the release of detainees from Gaza. Rubio said talks were ongoing and stressed the urgency of reaching an agreement within days. The development follows Hamas's partial acceptance of U.S. President Donald Trump's 20-point peace proposal, which includes ending the war, Israel's withdrawal, and the release of detainees, though key issues remain unresolved. Israeli negotiators are set to arrive in Egypt tonight, with Hamas representatives, led by Hamas leader Khalil al-Hayya, expected in Cairo for talks alongside U.S. and Qatari officials to advance the most serious effort yet to end the conflict.
Russia has a right to take all of Ukraine and do whatever they want there. So that's not inconsistent with that statement. That is separate from the issue we face today, and that is that as it stands...
An Israeli government spokesperson has announced that Israeli negotiators will depart for Egypt with indirect talks on releasing detainees set to begin tomorrow. And she clarified that there is no ceasefire in Gaza, only a temporary pause in certain strikes, and claimed Israel's army retains the right to operate for defensive purposes. The negotiations involving Israel and Hamas will take place under the mediation of the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar, and the talks resume after months of suspension following Hamas's acceptance of U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan and its readiness to negotiate the first phase, focused on releasing all Israeli detainees, both alive and deceased. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel will not proceed with any of the 20 provisions in the U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan until the first condition, the release of all Israeli detainees, both alive and dead, is fully met. Netanyahu stressed that Gaza will not be governed by the Palestinian Authority or any representative linked to Hamas, and that Israel will oversee disarmament efforts. And Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, has said that the Israeli occupation forces will remain in areas of control inside Gaza to protect settlements and will work to disarm Hamas. And speaking at a memorial for the dead of the October 1973 war, Katz said he expects the first phase to be carried out soon and demanded the immediate release of all detainees. He added the Israeli army is positioned in the heart of Gaza and is prepared to escalate fire if Hamas refuses to free the detainees, aiming for Hamas's defeat and the detainees' release. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid has announced his readiness to provide a political safety net for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to help finalize a detainee exchange deal with Hamas and end the Gaza war. Lapid said he informed U.S. President Donald Trump's team of his full support to ensure the agreement proceeds as planned. And he added that Netanyahu now faces no political obstacles to implementing Trump's plan, suggesting they could agree on an election date while securing guarantees against far-right partners. Earlier, Lapid endorsed Trump's peace efforts, urging Israel to join the U.S.-led negotiations, which he described as a rare opportunity to secure the release of the detainees and achieve an end to the war. And tens of thousands of people dressed in red rallied in Amsterdam, calling on governments to act over what they described as a genocide in Gaza. The large-scale demonstration was part of a wave of global protests demanding stronger international action to end the war and protect civilians in the Palestinian territory. Organizers said the turnout reflected growing outrage at the humanitarian crisis as calls mount for an immediate ceasefire and accountability for alleged violations in Gaza. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry has announced that Cairo will host meetings tomorrow between Israeli and Palestinian delegations to discuss the field arrangements and details of the exchange of the Israeli and Palestinian detainees. The ministry added that these consultations come as part of the ongoing efforts to build on the regional and international momentum generated by the U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza, emphasizing Egypt's commitment to advancing peace and stability through dialogue and coordination with all concerned parties. Earlier, Egypt has welcomed Hamas's response to U.S. President Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan, praising the movement and all Palestinian factions for prioritizing civilian lives. In a statement by the Foreign Ministry, Egypt stated that Hamas's stance reflects a firm desire to end a dark era and move towards Palestinian statehood. That comes as Cairo praises Trump's leadership, particularly his rejection of annexation or displacement and his reconstruction plan for Gaza. Egypt urged all parties to honor the U.S. proposal, begin detailed negotiations, and advance a political path towards a two-state solution and lasting peace. In a joint statement, the foreign ministers of Egypt, Jordan, the UAE, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar have welcomed Hamas's response to U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal to end the Gaza war and release all detainees and begin talks on implementation mechanisms. The minister has also praised Trump's call for Israel to halt its bombardment immediately and start the exchange process, viewing these steps as a vital opportunity for a lasting ceasefire and relief to Gaza's humanitarian crisis. They reaffirmed support for efforts to ensure an Israeli withdrawal, full humanitarian access, the return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza, and progress towards a two-state solution. And for more analysis, we now move to Mona Mselhi in our newsroom. Mona.
Thank you so much, Salman. For further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Al Akhbar daily newspaper editor-in-chief, Dr. Osama Saeed. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. Let me here start by asking, how significant are President Trump's remarks that negotiations over Gaza are progressing very well, given the history of failed mediation attempts in the conflict?
It is very clear that this time the United States are willing to put actual pressure to reach successful negotiations. Before the Israel mediated, and there was some kind of USA cover on Netanyahu for Netanyahu to escape his responsibilities, but this time it looks different. It looks like U.S. President Donald Trump is very willing to reach a truce and to end this war, maybe because he wants to get the Nobel Prize for Peace, which he has said before, or also through the USA's government objectives to lessen the price of their engagement, especially with the isolation that Israel is facing and the condemnation even from Washington's allies on USA and Israel, especially with the wave of international recognition of a Palestinian statehood, and this actually caused the USA to be some kind of embarrassed. And so I think this time that USA's President Donald Trump has said that he is very hopeful to reach negotiations and to reach peace could actually lead to an actual achievement, and it may be different from the negotiations that we have seen before that Netanyahu has failed before, and the USA didn't then or put the needed pressure to actually have these negotiations be successful.
Right. What does the reported clashes between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu reveal about the dynamics of U.S.-Israeli relations during these negotiations?
First of all, we have to put a difference between the point of views between U.S. President Donald Trump and Netanyahu when it comes to the tactics difference. It is not a democratic difference between the two countries, but maybe it is a difference when it comes to the priorities. I think that the U.S. president is done with the stalling that Netanyahu is doing to escape to escape actual negotiations to stop the war, and also Hamas's approval on the U.S. plan put pressure on Netanyahu, because when he approved the plan, he was expecting that maybe Hamas will refuse, and so he will blame them basically for the war and will reach his objective of continuing this war. And so Hamas's approval actually was unexpected, and so it caused more tension, either when it comes to him saying that he doesn't trust Hamas or that he doesn't want the Palestinian government taking control in the Gaza Strip, and other statements that the U.S. president has refused and saw them as stalling and trying to or not taking advantage of this opportunity. And so the differences between Netanyahu and Donald Trump is actually a difference when it comes to priorities. The path that they want to take and taking and the path to negotiations, but it is we can say it is a difference in the democracy or politically between the two countries, because the USA is the first supporter of Israel and it protects Israel's benefits, and so it is, we can say that there is a difference that will lead to a huge transformation when it comes to USA's stance on Tel Aviv.
Right, for Trump's demand for an immediate halt to Israeli airstrikes, to what extent does this reflect a kind of shift in US policy?
Of course, the transformation is there, and ever since Donald Trump has proposed the plan, he's been pressuring on all sides to have a successful outcome, asking Israel to stop all its operations, especially the brutal strikes that Israel is doing on the Gaza Strip. And so this is very normal, because they cannot talk about a chance to stop the war and release the detainees or have the detainee exchange deal while Israel is continuing its operations and even escalating them. For example, there are tens of martyrs that have died today only, even though there are U.S. delegations or a U.S. delegation, and there is expected to be an Israeli delegation to come to Cairo to negotiate the detainee exchange deal and stopping the war, and Israel starting to withdraw from Gaza. And so these are all indicators that show that Netanyahu isn't serious and is trying to take advantage of this opportunity to strike Gaza more or destroy it further. And so these are all negative indicators, and I think that the USA needs to take stronger measures than just asking Israel to stop its operations, its military operations on Gaza. We need actual pressure and asking Netanyahu or forcing him to comply to what the USA said and to stop the military operation, so that they can have or can negotiate and have a real negotiation to decide a lot of points once and for all, especially when it comes to the detainee exchange deal, and also entering the second phase of negotiations, whether it comes to the next day preparations and the Gaza Strip or the Israeli withdrawal from the Strip.
Now, how may Hamas' partial acceptance of Trump's 20-point peace proposal influence the balance of leverage between the negotiating parties?
First of all, Hamas didn't really have any choices, because if they refused this plan, the price would be high then, and it was some kind of a new green light that the USA can give to Israel and to Netanyahu to do whatever he likes in the Gaza Strip. And so Hamas is fully responsible for what could have happened in the Strip. But of course, this approval shows a positive political transformation, even if there are some refusal to the plan, especially that the plan has some vague points and needs further negotiations and explanation. But at least Hamas's approval actually put the ball in Israel's court and changed Donald Trump's stance and put all the pressure on Israel now. And this actually benefits the mediators, especially that the Egyptian and Qatari mediators have pressured Hamas to convince them of the importance of accepting this proposal or this plan, because the mediators think of this proposal and of the agreement as a positive outcome that could really end the war, and it is a huge victory for the Palestinians to stop the bloodshedding of the Palestinians and deliver humanitarian aid that the Palestinians really need. And there is a dire need to try to save anything that can be saved in the Strip.
Finally here, Netanyahu's insistence that no provisions of the peace plan will move ahead or forward until the detainees are released. What do you have on that?
Of course, this is expected because the main goal of this war, or at least the one that was talked about, is releasing the detainees in the Gaza Strip and having them back in the Israeli land. Maybe this plan will allow that, but we cannot stop here, especially that there are lots of mistrust when it comes to Israel's willingness, and we have they have a bad history of trying to escape their responsibilities, and we saw that with the two truces that we had in November 2023 and Jan 2025, and we also saw how Israel actually breached the truces and destroyed any path to end the war, especially after they gave back the detainees. And so yes, they don't really trust them. Netanyahu wants to get his detainees without showing endorsement for any of the other points, because, and here comes the USA's role, because with no clear law of from the UN side of having Israel comply to this plan, withdrawing from the Strip to try to take actual steps to end this crisis, then we cannot have really peace, because Hamas will lose their last card, basically, which is the detainee card, and so they won't have any leverage or any cards to play after that. And this may be what Netanyahu is aiming for, but the USA has to live up to its rule and respect its responsibilities on forcing the plan on all sides, and with Netanyahu on top, of course.
All right, that was Dr. Osama Saeed, Al-Akhbar daily newspaper editor-in-chief from Cairo. We thank you so much for joining us here on Q News. And now we go back to Salma Al-Fei in our studio. Salma.
Thank you, Mona. German Foreign Minister Johann Vadeful has described the U.S. President Donald Trump's plan for Gaza as a significant opportunity to finally achieve peace, as per his description. Vadeful said this opportunity must be seized before his departure for Qatar, where he plans to meet with representatives from the region. The German Foreign Minister called on Hamas to give up its weapons and be prepared for this agreement. Pope Leo XIV has said he hoped that a peace plan for Gaza would soon reach the desired results, after acknowledging the significant steps made in the negotiations to end the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Speaking during his weekly prayer, the Pope asked all parties involved to commit to the peace process, emphasizing the urgent need to end the conflict and establish a just and lasting peace. He also renewed calls for a permanent ceasefire in the nearly 2-year devastating war on Gaza and the release of detainees. Smoke has risen over Gaza this morning as Israeli planes and tanks pounded areas across the Gaza Strip, destroying several residential buildings. And the latest bombardment comes as Palestinians hope that a U.S. plan to end the war would soon ease their suffering. And Israel escalated its offensive as U.S. President Donald Trump, who had called for an end to the bombing, said that Israel had agreed to an initial withdrawal line inside Gaza and that the ceasefire will be immediately effective once Hamas confirms. Egypt has been at the heart of efforts to end the Gaza war and leading mediation, delivering vital aid and mobilizing regional and international support to stop the bloodshed and push for a lasting solution.
Since the outbreak of the war in Gaza in October 2023, Egypt has led intensive efforts from the very first moments to end hostilities and alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians. Cairo moved swiftly to deliver humanitarian aid through every possible channel and exerted consistent pressure regionally and internationally to stop the bloodshed and prevent any attempt to displace Palestinians from their land. U.S. President Donald Trump praised Egypt's leadership for its central role in shaping a plan to end the conflict, which includes ending the war and releasing Israeli detainees. He again thanked Cairo for its efforts. From the onset of the Al-Aqsa flood operation, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi directed Egyptian diplomacy to intensify contacts with all relevant parties to contain the conflict. Egypt called on key international actors to intervene immediately to stop the escalation, urge Israel to halt attacks and provocations, and uphold international humanitarian law as the occupying power. Cairo hosted the Peace Summit on October 21, 2023, bringing together regional and global leaders to address the crisis. On June 10, 2024, Jordan, in coordination with Egypt, Bahrain, and the United Nations, organized an international humanitarian response conference to coordinate global action and logistics for Gaza. Egypt also convened an extraordinary Arab summit in March 2025 to discuss developments in the Palestinian cause. In parallel, Egypt maintained close coordination with Qatar and the United States to reach a ceasefire and a detainee exchange deal, while firmly rejecting any attempts to expel Palestinians or alter Gaza's demographic reality by force. Cairo has also delivered more than 70% of all aid that entered the Gaza Strip during the conflict, working through the Egyptian Red Crescent and global organizations, and opening Al Arish Airport to receive assistance from around the world. Today, Egypt remains a pivotal stabilizing force, affirming that the just and comprehensive solution lies in establishing a two-state reality and ending the occupation, the only path toward lasting peace and a definitive end to the war.
In Iran, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said that cooperation with the IAEA will be reconsidered after the West reimposed sanctions via the snapback mechanism. He accused European countries of using the mechanism as failed pressure, weakening their role in future talks. Araghchi stressed that diplomacy is the only solution and said Iran is open to negotiations if based on mutual respect and goodwill. He also added that Iran has signed a new cooperation framework with the IAEA as the previous model is no longer viable due to recent tensions. Moving on to Sudan, where the Sudanese government has said that the Rapid Support Forces drone attack on the city of El Obeid constitutes a grave violation of international law. And in a statement, it described the assault as a desperate attempt to mask the militia's repeated defeats, accusing the Rapid Support Forces of endangering civilian lives and sabotaging vital infrastructure and public services. The government reaffirmed its commitment to protecting civilians, restoring security and stability, and upholding the rule of law. And according to the Sudanese media, Army Air Defenses intercepted several drones during the RSF's nighttime attack on El Obeid, the capital of North Kordofan state. Georgian police fired tear gas and water cannons at anti-government protesters attempting to storm the presidential palace during mass demonstrations held alongside local elections. Tens of thousands rallied in what the opposition called a last chance protest to defend democracy, accusing the ruling Georgian Dream Party of undermining institutions. The unrest comes amid deep political divisions following last year's disputed parliamentary elections, which opposition groups say were rigged. conflict. Authorities reported several arrests as clashes broke out near the palace. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, and here's what we have been covering. Donald Trump announces that negotiations over Gaza are progressing very well. Netanyahu states that Israel will not implement any provisions unless all Israeli detainees are released. And the foreign ministers of Egypt and 7 other nations welcome Hamas's response in a joint statement. And this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. And don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG to stay informed. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.